Water. Without it there could be no life. With it there is life for fish and fowl and plants and cattle and men. But pollution can kill a stream or a lake. It can make water dead, reducing oxygen to the point where life in it dies and life on it ceases. Here in Minnesota, water is one of our greatest blessings. The state is named, in fact, from two Dakota Indian words, Minna meaning water, and Sota clear or sky-tinted. And in the northern lakes, the haunt of hunter and fishermen, mecca of the resort crowd, source of the great Mississippi, the melting snows of winter promise sparkling water, pure and lively and life-giving. Could it be that this is the land of the dying waters?
One of the big worries in Minnesota water pollution is the Mississippi River. We're out today on Old Man River aboard the Mike Harris, a Mississippi River towboat. Its captain and owner is Addison Harris of Minneapolis. Captain Harris, how long have you been out here working on the river?
Oh, I'd say in around about 22 to 25 years, approximately 25 years.
What kind of towing do you do?
At the present time, our main towing is coal barges for northern states. In this particular trip up river, we're taking an empty barge up to the upper harbor of Minneapolis, up to American Iron. And we will spot this barge for loading with scrap and depart from American Iron with one load of scrap destined for Laclede Steel in St. Louis.
Captain, what section of the river do you work? Do you stay sort of in one part of it, or do you roam all over the Mississippi?
Well, since World War II, I've been working in the Minneapolis and St. Paul harbor exclusively, due to the fact that there's a very large demand for efficient harbor service, due to the fact that our river business is increasing every year, and they're getting more and more docks and industrial concerns locating on the river.
Captain, how about the matter of pollution out here? Have you seen a great change in your years?
Oh, yes. Before the Twin City disposal plant was built, why, this river was just about as filthy a thing as you could ever imagine. As a matter of fact, I remember back in those days where the carp were so thick were so thick in the river that you could practically walk across the river without getting your feet wet. And back in those days, everybody thought of the river as a place to dispose of things. I've seen everything under the shining sun dumped in the river, and just creating a tremendous amount of pollution. And of course, all raw sewage from the Twin Cities were dumped completely into the river, and any amount of other debris thrown in the river. The river at that time was used as nothing but a dump.
So you're saying that you've seen a great deal of improvement?
Oh, since the Twin City disposal plant has been in operation, this river has cleaned up, I'd say, at least 1,000%.
Captain, as we're going along here, every so often we see some evidence of debris and things in the water. What are these sources of pollution?
Well, for the last 3 weeks there, at 29th Street sewer crossing, just above Lake Street, for some reason or other, they are discharging a great amount of raw sewage in the river. And Just why, I don't know, because normally we don't have that, but for some reason or other, they are just discharging that, and it's a very bad detergent discharge. And over on the other side of the river, on the left descending bank, just below the Milwaukee Bridge, you will see three pipes coming out at the river level, and also detergent discharge. Now, they may be having trouble down at the pig's eye disposal plant. I don't know, but normally we don't have that discharge. But it is a very big amount of discharge at the present time, and very detrimental to keeping clean water in the river.
Captain, is what we see here at just above lock number 1, it's floating mass in the water. Is this an evidence of some of the sewage entering into the Mississippi above us?
Yes, definitely. That's a detergent scum on the surface of the water, and it's definitely has come down from the 29th Street sewer crossing and the other sewer crossing across the other side of the river, just below the Milwaukee Bridge.
Let me ask, Captain, if you think the commercial river traffic is any source of pollution to any extent out here.
Oh, the commercial river traffic is a small source of pollution, just as the pleasure craft are. But in comparison to the amount of sewage that is being discharged here at the 29th Street crossing here now, the boat pollution is very small. Right. On a comparative basis.
What would you say is the worst evidence of pollution that you've ever seen, Captain?
Well, about 2 years ago, that is in the local area here, why, when the asphalt came down from Port Richards and the soybean oil from Mankato, why, that really made an awful mess on the river here, and killed a lot of waterfowl, and all our shorelines and dock areas were completely filled up with that asphalt. And as a matter of fact, running up light boat with our towboat, why, the asphalt would splash up on the decks and the catwalks, so we were continually cleaning that stuff off until after it had been dissipated. And a few years back, I was down in St. Louis on the old showboat, down there, Captain Menke's showboat, and I looked upriver and I saw, the complete river was filled with something white. And I spoke to Captain Menke. I said, Cap, what under the shining sun is that coming down river up there? Oh, he said, Cap, that's nothing but chicken feathers. I said, chicken feathers? I said, where the dickens they come from? And he said, well, we have a chicken processing plant in St. Louis, and all their chicken feathers and discards are sent down into the sewer, and this is the net result, this river full of chicken feathers.
Captain, for a man who's given so much of his life to the river, you must love it.
Well, yes, in some respects I really do. But one thing with this towboat work, there's a new challenge every day. You have different type of barges. You have different weather conditions. You have high water or you have low water, and it always keeps you on your toes, and it's a really challenging occupation.
Are you worried about pollution of the Mississippi and our other Minnesota waters?
Yes, I think we should, every one of us, be vitally concerned about the water pollution in our state and in the entire country as far as that's concerned.
Public interest in pollution control has increased greatly of late. The problem has received attention in the newspapers, on radio and television, and the Federal Water Pollution Control Administration's pollution abatement recommendations for the area have made the issue more prominent. Minnesota's North Country, shown here in lovely scenes from Allen Downs' Flight of the Teal. There are really hundreds more than the 10,000 lakes of Minnesota legend. Lakes from a few acres in size to Red Lake, 440 square miles in area, and Leech Lake and Mille Lacs, each of which cover some 200 square miles. Perhaps the most famous of all is Lake Itasca, principal source of the Father of Waters, the Mississippi. Much of Minnesota's boundary is outlined by natural waterways, and the interior of the state is laced by navigable rivers and good-sized tributaries. Water means a lot to us in Minnesota. Consider some of the ways we use it. We drink water, we cook with it, we use it for processing food. Our tourist industry is built in the ways water is useful in recreation, swimming and boating and fishing, and skiing, of course. Water has beauty, and it reflects the charm of other landscape features. We use it for watering livestock and irrigating crops. It's a home for waterfowl. It cools our car radiators, and it runs in air conditioners. It powers the generators of electricity and serves industry in hundreds of ways. It's useful for transportation and for navigation, for firefighting, and for healing muscles and limbs. And we use water, too, to dispose of industrial wastes and sewage. And many of the ways we use water are also the cause of its pollution. Pollution is an ugly word because it seems to threaten death in something so close to life. Of course, there's no way to get around pollution of some sort. Waters completely pure and pristine are simply not possible in certain areas of the country if other life processes are to go on. It's possible, in fact, that some streams may serve mankind better by carrying off the wastes of a community than by providing a home for fish and aquatic life. And there appear to be natural sources of water pollution, just as there are natural forces for purification and redemption of the water. The growth of population and the advance of industry and technology, however, do threaten us with alarming pollution problems. And there are many voices crying out for controls. Citizens groups and industries and government agencies. Here among the sparkling waters of the North is where the Mississippi is born. The farther we get away from the Mississippi, the farther we follow the river down its course toward the Gulf, the more blatant are some forms of pollution. Factories pour thousands of gallons of waste-laden waters into streams, tributaries of the Mississippi and the Father of Water itself. Not until fairly recent years have they begun to introduce controls. We may think of pollution as trouble downstream. But the fact is, waters leave this very stretch of the Mississippi already polluted. The federal report named some 60 polluters along the sections of the three rivers studied. Industries and sewage treatment plants along the Mississippi, Minnesota, and St. Croix were named. Here are some excerpts from that report. Sewage and other waste contain many constituents which affect water quality and restrict the water's use. Floating materials such as grease, oils, and solids lower the aesthetic quality, making it less attractive for all uses. Oxygen-consuming materials can limit or destroy fish and other desirable aquatic life by reducing the dissolved oxygen concentration in the water. Suspended solids, including silt from land erosion, create turbidity, as is shown in the greater turbidity here of the Minnesota River, which not only makes the water less suitable as a source of supply and for recreational uses, but also can be damaging to fish. Larger suspended solids eventually settle out, forming a sludge blanket on the bottom. Some of the intestinal bacteria present in sewage in astronomical numbers may be pathogens which can reinfect man. Citing municipal pollution sources on the Mississippi, the report indicates the Minneapolis-St. Paul Sanitary Sewage District contributes 91% of the municipal waste volume. Of the total municipal contribution, its waste effluent contained 88% of the oxygen-consuming materials. Well, in sum, the report is not very encouraging. What is encouraging is that there are government agencies, both federal and state, studying the problem and working for improved controls of water pollution. Town meeting visited with William Sayers of the Federal Water Pollution Control Administration, the agency that issued the report. At the map, he pointed out some of the major pollution points on the Mississippi, Minnesota, and St. Croix rivers. And then he spoke about the investigation being conducted by the federal agency.
Federal intervention in the pollution problems of the Twin Cities area was brought about by a request from the governors of Minnesota and Wisconsin back in September of 1963. As a result of this request, the federal government conducted a 3-year investigation of pollution in the Twin Cities area. The area covered is shown by the map behind me here. The investigation determined, one, who the major pollution sources were, secondly, what effects they were having on the water quality in the study area, and thirdly, what remedial measures would be necessary to correct the existing problem. The study was conducted, as I said, and was just recently completed, and recommendations were submitted to the conferees and were accepted with some modification. And so now we're in a period where these recommendations are beginning to be met, and will be met within a 4-year period. And we are involved in a surveillance action within the next 4 years to keep a check on the progress being made by these waste polluters. Now we're phasing out essentially the enforcement project with exception of these surveillance activities, and we're going into a comprehensive study of the whole upper Mississippi River Basin. Now the enforcement project covered only the existing problems and more or less immediate solutions to the existing problems. The comprehensive study will cover problems to be anticipated in the future, brought about by increases in population and economic activity primarily. We'll consider the whole upper Mississippi River Basin from the headwaters on downstream to the mouth of the Ohio River. And we'll consider the population growth and the economic industrial growth in the area, and convert these terms into terms of amounts of water being used, in terms of quantities of water needed and the quality of water needed to carry on these various activities and to maintain the various water uses in the basin. This study will last about 3 years, and then at the end of this time we'll prepare a report which will be a comprehensive plan for the whole upper Mississippi River Basin. And here we'll be able to tell what amount of treatment will be required by each of the waste sources at various dates in the future. Of course, as the population grows and the number of waste sources increase, the degree of treatment required by each of them will increase as well. Now, as far as the long-range problem, it's one of having a limited amount of water available. There is an estimated 1,200 billion gallons of water available to the United States each day, and by 1980 the daily average demand will be about 600 billion gallons per day. By the year 2000, the demand will be up to about 1,000 billion gallons per day. So we're fast approaching the volume of water that is available. And this means reusing water then. And so it's imperative that we return the water to the streams after we're finished using it, so that it is in a form that is suitable for reuse by those downstream from us.
After talking to William Sayers of the Federal Water Pollution Control Administration, town meeting moved to a conversation with a pollution control official of the state. During this break in commission hearings, we have Mr. Lyle H. Smith, the executive engineer with the Minnesota Water Pollution Control Commission. Mr. Smith, what are the kinds of pollution generally that we face here in Minnesota?
We're concerned primarily with industrial pollution, domestic waste, agricultural runoff, and then natural runoff.
What is the latter kind of pollution source you're talking about?
Natural runoff would be from vegetation, forested areas, swampy areas where a large amount of nutrients would be carried into our lakes and streams.
Is one of the kinds of pollution that we face in our northern part of the state?
This is the source, the predominant source in the northern part of the state, in our boundary water canoe area, certainly.
Are there any critical pollution problems that we face in the lakes in which we have so much pride?
I probably wouldn't term it critical, certainly serious problems in various parts of the state. Areas that the Commission is concerned with, problems that the Commission has been working with.
There's been a great deal of public concern over pollution problems in recent days, agitation in the press and public and citizen organizations and so on, but surely affect a good deal of your work and concern. Is this public expression too idealistic in some ways, do you think?
I think the public expression is good. We must keep in mind that whatever we attempt to do must be reasonable. We must take into consideration the economic, the social aspects as well as the strict water pollution control aspects of the problem.
Are people asking for too much, do you think, in pollution control?
No, in general not. Possibly in specific instances we may be somewhat too idealistic, but this is what helps promote the whole program. We must have public interest and public support.
Is it possible to really have perfect streams and lakes? Is pollution not always going to be in some dimension with us?
I think we've always had pollution, even back before we were developed, back in the days of the Indian. Here again, the natural background of pollution from decaying vegetation and this sort of thing will create a certain pollutional load on our streams, yes.
Is the problem on the increase?
Problem of water pollution control certainly is becoming greater because of the larger populations, the concentration of population, the development of new and larger industries, the development of these industries, and then the demand by this increased population for more and better water because they are using the waters more for water-oriented recreation. They have more leisure time, they have more funds to expend for this purpose, they're much more mobile than they used to be, and all of these factors are entering into the interest in and the demand for cleaner streams, cleaner water.
Your commission is set up as a state agency to carry on this work. Obviously, your commission cannot do it alone. What kinds of help and support are needed?
Support can come from all levels of government as well as the individual. The individual in seeing that his own facilities are operating properly, if he happens to have his own septic tank and soil absorption field, or if he lives in the community, to see that this community has the proper facilities as well as the industries in the general location, and to support the statewide programs, to support the various levels of government that are concerned with this program, because it's only through the support of the individual that any program can be successful.
That may mean part of his tax dollar as well.
This very well could mean part of his tax dollar, yes.
Under the Water Quality Act of 1965, the Minnesota Water Pollution Control Commission will submit its recommendations for state water quality standards to the federal agency for review. The federal group has said repeatedly it prefers the state set standards and will step in only if this fails. There's constant experiment in ways to return polluted waters to purity and usefulness. One such experiment sprays water containing sewage wastes over forest land. The sludge fertilizes the land and the water moves through the ground, through the living filter the earth provides, down into the underground water sources in new purity, restored as usable. If industry has seen dollar signs and dragged its feet somewhat in the past on pollution control, this is not necessarily the pattern for the future. Federal aid is available to the company and the municipality. Some companies accepting responsibility for their role in water pollution are installing expensive equipment to treat the contaminated or heated water before returning it to streams and lakes. But what can we do? Can we help to keep our Minnesota waters lively and life-giving? Sometimes it may be the outraged citizen himself who is the polluter unawares. Citizens do come in many different attitudes. The water purist emotionally insists on highest standards, while his more realistic neighbor accepts reasonable standards he thinks can be met. The conservationist and recreationist know improvement takes long, constant, patient effort. Health authorities see danger of disease with swimming and skiing in polluted waters. The indifferent citizen wonders why all the fuss. After all, sunlight and fast-flowing streams were enough to keep water clean in the past. Citizen interest is not enough, of course. Industrial and municipal responsibility is clearly needed, and legislative action is important. But it is the individual citizen who in the end will pay in taxes, higher prices, or both, whether cities, states, industries, or the federal government move to more stringent pollution controls. Our abundant water supplies in Minnesota have made our state beautiful. It nurtures trees and grasses, it waters our stock and irrigates the fields, and it refreshes our children. In the Twin Cities and many of its suburbs, the waters we drink come from the Mississippi. And while the water intake is upstream from the major pollution sources, we send our pollutants to communities downstream. It is not a local problem or a statewide concern. Pollution of the water involves us all, and therefore it concerns us all. In the words of President Johnson, no one has a right to use America's rivers and America's waterways that belong to all the people as a sewer. The banks of the river may belong to one man or one industry or one state, but the waters which flow between these banks should belong to all the people. Water and life are inseparable. Water, in fact, is the symbol of life. It cleanses and renews, as at baptism. Without water, there could be no life. With it, there is life, for fish and fowl, for plants and cattle and men. But pollution can kill a stream or a lake. It can make water dead, reducing oxygen to the point where life in it dies and life on it ceases. Here in Minnesota, water is one of our greatest blessings. Water that is often sparkling and life-giving. But do we give our water to others in the same way we would like to receive it? Without our concern for pollution control, the concern of industry and government to be sure, but the concern of the private citizen too, Minnesota could be the land of dying waters. Town meeting of the Twin Cities area is funded under Title I of the Higher Education Act of 1965 through Augsburg College.